Greetings, everyone. I am absolutely thrilled today to be in conversation with Suzy Miller. And let me introduce you, Suzy, and then we'll get into conversation about your work and about some of what you're experiencing currently that speaks to the shifts that we're all in this time. But Suzy Miller is a visionary speaker, author, telepathic communicator, multidimensional seer, and integration specialist. And she is author of the book Awesomeness and A New Way to Understand Autism. And her work is featured in the Telepathy Tapes. Actually, just trying to describe you is very difficult because the nature of your work is so innovative and difficult to put into words. And you've really been honoring your own path of exploration and development as you've worked with the autistic children that you've worked with and the adults you've worked with. I have such respect for your courage and your willingness to venture into unknown territory, coming from being a pediatric speech-language pathologist at the beginning. So, can you talk a little bit, Suzy, about how you started on this direction of doing the work that you're doing now?
Yeah, so like you say, background is pediatric speech-language pathologist, and I had a full-time speech pathology practice in Maine, and like people sending kids from different places, and I went to visit a child in 1999, and when I walked in, this child's walking around in the daycare center saying, "It's the millennium, it's 1999." And in 1986, when I graduated with my master's degree, autism was 1 in 10,000. So there was no study of autism when I got my master's degree. And so when he looked at me and when he was walking around like that, I just thought he was a different little kid. It's like, um, but he walked right up to me in the daycare center and he made direct eye contact with me, which now I know is rare. But he made direct eye contact with me and he said, "Master." And when he said the word master, there was something that was moving through my whole body. It was like a visceral sensation that was taking place. And I remember thinking in my mind, who's the master here? Like somebody can say a word and something starts cascading down through your body. And so I took him to the back of the daycare center and he's still kind of marching around and he didn't feel to me like he wanted to be in that room. He wanted to be out with the kids. And so I sat with my back across against the door and I was just watching him and I thought, I'm just going to calm down myself until he calms and then we'll get started. And all of a sudden, as he's walking around, I see a body of light floating above his physical body. It was like just like a cutout doll of light, but bright white light. And there was a little tail that hung off the light body foot, went into his head and kind of dangled into his heart. And I didn't know what I was seeing. I didn't know why I was seeing that. So I kept rubbing my eyes, trying to get it to go away, and it wouldn't go away. And so I did the next sensible thing I thought, which is like ask myself, what is that? Like, what am I seeing here? And when I asked that question, I heard a little boy's voice telepathically in my head. And he said, "That's my light body. You're here to put my light body back with my physical body." And I had no idea whatsoever why he thought I could do that. I didn't know what that meant or how that process was going to go. But I did know in that moment that my life had just taken a hard right. My life had just taken a different turn. And he basically took me through a year-long process where he would come to me through bilocation, or he would come to me in dreams, or when I was with him physically, he would telepathically communicate with me. And he told me exactly what to do to help reintegrate, you might say, that light and form. And at the end of that year, um, I did maybe a distance energy session is the best way to say it from my house. He was at his house. I did that on my birthday, kind of as a birthday gift to
Mm.
myself. But I did that session, and the next day I physically went to see him in his home. And when his mom opened the door, he was standing at the top of the stairs, and he goes, "Hi, Susie, how are you?" Just clear as day. And he came down the stairs, and I grabbed him and took him into the back room again in his bedroom and just had him like, what happened? Like, what is this? And I remember he said, I still have his writings because he wrote it as he was speaking it. He just said, it's the amazing, he said, it's the most amazing advance. You love them, now advance the magic. So that's what I've been doing ever since. So, yeah.
But it's so incredible that you allowed yourself to open to this and really be taught by him, be coached by him in how to enter into this other way of working.
I think that was the biggest blessing of not having kind of cognitive knowledge about autism or about, what he was experiencing because I couldn't come in with ideas of how to support him because I didn't have any. I wasn't taught any. So I very much was at the behest of whatever he was going to be able to share with me. And it's happened that way, Heather, ever since, because these kids they know who they are, they know what they're doing, they know what they need. We just haven't had an access point to communicate with them in order to hear that information. So for a long time, I just kind of acted as a bridge between their world and the world of the parents or the professionals at the time that were trying to figure out, how do we support? Um, but it was fascinating to me from the get-go, too, that what these children held in their awareness and what they had access to was so far above and beyond the kinds of questions that were being asked about them. It's like the questions were coming from, good human nature. It's like good, loving parents who want to support their children in this physical world, in this physical domain, which I completely understand. As a parent myself, I can get that. But it was almost like the kids were saying, we're here inviting you to a much bigger version of yourself than these challenges and problems that you're perceiving need to be fixed. Yeah.
As you and I've talked about it in previous conversations, it's like they're living at a different dimensional reality. And that part of our misunderstanding of them is we're seeing them through the lens of this third dimensional reality that they don't actually fit in.
They talk about that a lot. They talk about the fact that, like, they're functioning in what I would consider like a unified field or a field of oneness, where we're all hopefully evolving into right now. We still see the world primarily through the lens of separation. And that's, eons of conditioning and, all of that. And so nobody's fault that we see through the lens of conditioning. But as these souls have been coming in mass, like since the harmonic convergence in 1987, they're kind of like going, no, we're going to come in, we're going to hold a whole different vibrational state. We're going to hold a coherent state in that field, and we're just going to keep inviting you to it. And I've had so many of these kids say, we are not coming here. We're not, no matter, you can do whatever you want to do, but we're not going to fully embody until here is the frequency of love. And so I think that that invitation is there all day, every day for people who work with and, live with this population. Not an easy invite by any stretch, especially moving from separation to oneness, but the invite's there nonetheless.
So, in such a profound way, they've been trying to seed this new consciousness that we're trying to move into and support us in waking up. And it seems like in your work, you are seeing the ways in which they activate different family members and are calling their family members, calling all of us into reclaiming those lost parts of ourselves, seeing ourselves more clearly, to be able to see them more clearly, to come more into wholeness. You talk about your work being a lot about helping people reintegrate the lost aspects of themselves or the dissociated parts of themselves. Can you say more about that?
Yeah. Um, First, I want to say that, if you have somebody who, let's say, doesn't come here with a lot of their own baggage, like as a soul, they're coming more from that field of wholeness. So if you have somebody in your life like that, that is in your presence all the time, the only thing that they're really doing is mirroring, right? So their fields are pretty clear for the most part, but they're day in, day out walking around in the fields of their parents and the professionals that work with them. And so what's happening is we get this mirror effect. We get to see ourselves more deeply and more clearly. And when I've talked to parents over the years, like even when they were pregnant with this child, even if the child was born and looked typical and then later got this diagnosis, a lot of those parents will say, even while this soul was growing in their womb, even while this child was developing, they were purging all kinds of ancestral imprinting. Sometimes their bodies were purging, sometimes their emotions. But if we look at it through the lens of frequency, if you have a higher frequency and a denser frequency, it's like shining a light in a dark space, right? And it's illuminating that. This goes on every day, all day for these families, which is challenging. But again, these kids are kind of saying, we're not going to come fully into the body until some of the things that haven't been loved within us get loved, and a lot of them will say, we're here to support the lineage.
Mm.
We're here to help clean up a lineage. A lot of these lineages will have trauma in them. Every lineage has some, but there will be that as well. But when you have a child who's just going, I'm not, I'm not, I'm not obeying the rules of masking or trying to just bypass something, they're just there. The presence is just there. And as it's there, man, it's like it brings up, I know in my own experience, there have been moments where I've said just working with them, so I can't even imagine what this is like for parents, but just working with them, I've noticed I got to take a break. I feel like I've just been digging into deeper aspects of myself over and over again, and I need a little bit of a break before we re-engage with this. They're just inviting us back to who we actually are or what's buried under all that conditioning. And the more we do that kind of work, I I've seen firsthand how that work in particular has a tendency to make all kinds of changes within families. That
Mm.
inner child work or that shadow work or whatever you want to call that. And however people do it, that's the piece that seems to really offer a different mirror, right? If we're clearing that field out, then we have to get a different mirror back. And if there's such clear, coherent mirrors, they're among the first to show it to us. Yeah.
So, do you think the fact that there are so many more autistic children that have been coming in these past decades, that that's part of what they're trying to do in the collective also to really support us all in waking up and doing the healing that we need to do to be remembering who we truly are and coming out of separation?
I know without a shadow of a doubt. I mean, well over 15,000 clients later, they all say the same thing, you know? So, and at one point, Heather, the collective of this community or this consciousness started interacting with me. And I remember in 2016, that collective came in and said, the underworld has now closed. And when I asked, what does that mean? They said all of the ways in which humanity had suppressed certain aspects of themselves or were held in deep separation, we can no longer hide that. Like that was all going to start bubbling up to the surface so that we as a humanity could start seeing what was in the shadow. And man, are we seeing it? You know, it's like that started in 2016 and it's reaching a kind of a fever pitch at this point. But I see that as all so amazing, so supportive, because we can't we can't fully embody or express the embodiment of who we are in truth if we're still in the quagmire of separation. You know, it's like the kids kept talking about landing, like they kept saying we want to land who we are in truth. And but we have to have the right environment, the physical environment to land in. And what is that vibrational environment? That vibrational environment is literally us releasing those parts of ourselves that have been held in separation, those parts of ourselves that we just haven't, they talk about this all the time. Just love on that. They always say that. It's like that part that we don't want to see or we don't want to acknowledge, or maybe that has gone down through the lineage and is a place of blame or shame or guilt, really, really low frequencies, right? They go, we don't have to fix that. We don't have to, we just have to sit with it long enough. We have to love it, right? Just be with it in love. And you watch it, it starts neutralizing. So
So, some of the intensity we're seeing on the planet right now is all of this is up in our consciousness, in our faces for that healing.
purposeful. Yeah.
And part of what you're describing is very similar to what the shamans describe as soul retrieval.
Yeah.
How do we reclaim those lost parts of ourselves that we've split off or pushed away because of trauma or because of family lineage issues? And it's both that all the shadow is up right now for us to see it, clear it, heal it, but also to be reclaiming these parts of ourselves that we've split off so that we come into our wholeness, so that we have the capacity to move into that higher frequency.
Yeah. And one of the things that the kids have said is around that one, how can we separate ourselves from any aspect of ourselves and feel whole? It doesn't make sense, right? And the other side of it is that as we're as we're loving those parts of ourselves that are asking for integration, then what naturally and organically gets released is some of it is our capacity. So, you know, I mean, we all came here, you know, we all came here in that frequency of light. Yep, that frequency of love. We all come in like ready to go, like we're so excited, and this is going to be another adventure. And then we get imprinted, and that imprinting is very purposeful. It's like it, some of that imprinting is very challenging, but that imprint is that invitation to remember why we're here or to have compassion where we might not have if we didn't have some of those struggles. So the kids say it's all part of the whole, but as we uncover these pieces of ourselves, as we love these pieces of ourselves, then right there, right where the conflict is, right underneath that is a capacity. And I feel like we're just all revealing ourselves to ourselves right now. We're revealing that we're so much more than we have perceived ourselves to be. And this is human evolution. This is that jump into who we are as a field of oneness instead of what we have been conditioned to believe we are. And that's really exciting about right now. Like so exciting. Yeah.
It is so exciting. And what you're describing is if we can each do that work, we're the microcosm of the macrocosm. So if we can accept those parts of ourselves that we push away or split off and really hold ourselves in love and come into wholeness, then we emanate that out and then we relate to everyone around us as part of the oneness. We can't be splitting off each other or polarized with each other if we're really opening to that awareness that we're all a part of the unified whole.
Yeah, it's all oneness. And so it's like, again, what we do to another, we've heard this, we've heard this a lot, but what we do to another, we do to ourselves. What we do for ourselves, we do for all others. And I think that, especially right now where there's so much going on, I think people are asking all the time, like, well, what can we do? It's like, or maybe even feeling victimized by the bigger chaos that's going on. But every single one of us can work with our own shadows. And I don't think that people really realize in the interconnectedness of all things how if Heather and Suzy are doing that work, or this person and that person's doing that work, these communities all over the world that are doing that work, that has a huge impact within the collective. That's a huge invitation to those that might find it a little bit more challenging to do that work right now.
That is so beautifully said, Susie. And it feels to me, and I often feel like if we do that work within ourselves, that is the most powerful social action work that we can be doing
Yes.
because it then emanates into that morphogenic field and it's supporting others in healing and it's emanating that love that supports others in opening to that energy.
It's so true. And I know we were talking about this before the recording, but this whole thing about doing lineage work or working with um, your ancestors and this kind of information, I think this is really important right now too. I know over the last several months that's been kind of a focus. And last night I had this dream where my mother's mother came to me in the dream, and all she said is, release what no longer serves and love all of your life. And, I think, I mean, wow, it's like you kind of go, release what no longer serves. And even we were just talking about this when I was working in the New World Portal community, and somebody said, well, how do you do that? How do you release what no longer serves? It's like, it feels like it's complicated or it's challenging. Again, I don't think we understand that when we say that's our intention, that's what we're going to do. When every time something comes up and we're have a tendency to react to it and we choose to respond to it, or maybe we choose to even distance ourselves for a moment. All of that is putting a cog in the wheel, you might say, of that repetitive patterning. And these little micro movements that we do on any given day, they make a big difference. And especially in an energetic climate like we're in now, where things are accelerated, where things are moving quicker, where we have other supports that we're collectively, that's collectively mirroring our readiness to be supported by bigger cosmic realities. It's like that's why I say, like, little things can make such a big difference. Yeah.
And I want to talk about some of those shifts. And you and I have talked a lot about
Mhm.
Three Eye Atlas and what's happening with that. But I think what you're saying, Susie, is so important because part of what you're saying that can assist us is stepping into that witness self, not being so identified with our stories or with our lineage, but being able to take a step back and be in that witness self, which then allows us to respond rather than react. And I think it's when we're in our witness self that we're able to connect more fully with our soul self
Mhm.
that then can hold us in love. And as you were saying earlier, when we begin to hold that compassion for ourselves, what no longer serves us dissolves.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not effortful. It no longer has space to be in that energy of love.
Yeah, and I think that the only reason that something got stuck in the first place or something, you know, um, was held past its due date, you might say, is because when we were experiencing whatever we were experiencing, it wasn't met with love, compassion, and understanding. And no fault of anybody's, but we're not projecting that on anyone. But the moment that we do meet it, with love, compassion, and understanding for ourselves, you're right. It dissolves literally in moments. I mean, this doesn't have to be this effortful, long, psychoanalysis kind of process. It literally is, I see it, right? I can be with it. I can love it for a moment and watch it dissolve and then go to the next one because we all have so many of these that come up in any given day. Yeah.
Oh, beautifully said. So, talk more about the shifts that you're seeing happening in such a rapid way now and what insights you got and the insights that came from some of the autistic children about Three Eye Atlas and what its meaning and message is for us in this time.
Yeah. So, in all honesty, Three Eye Atlas was not, I mean, it was on my radar because, I'm in this community but I wasn't really looking at it until the kids started saying, Three Eye Atlas, the energy of it is much more akin to the vibration of us. And it feels good. It feels good to be in that have that vibrational proximity, you might say, or have that impacting our solar system. So of course, then I wanted to go and look into it and find out what was going on. And what I noticed was it was almost as if, as Three Eye Atlas was moving through our solar system, it was altering the relationship that humanity had with the different planets that it was passing. And as it kind of, passed behind the sun, it almost felt like it was downloading, exchanging something with that solar energy. And of course, we have all these solar flares now. We have all this that's altering our DNA. And it felt like it was inviting us back to wholeness or inviting us back to oneness, um, helping here be the frequency of love. And so as I was when they asked me to do a trilogy of energy sessions, which I did, and a little bit reluctantly, I've got to say, because I was like, I'm used to the conversation with the collective consciousness of the kids. I wasn't so used to the conversation with something like an interstellar object. So that was new, right?
You're always on a growing edge, aren't you, Susie?
It's fortunately or unfortunately, I think so. But so what I noticed is, I think that started in July. Is that right? When Three Eye Atlas was identified or something was in July. So on 8/8, I had a young man reach out to me prior to that, reach out to me and said he wanted to meet. It was a young man diagnosed with autism. And he said, I want to meet you in a vortex. And I was like, okay, great. It's like, that's wonderful. And, but I heard, go meet this family, go meet this kid. And I had been working with them a little bit prior to that. Part of the reason I really wanted to meet with him is he was saying that he wanted to embody more of who he actually is, and he wanted to create a template for others to follow that
Mm,
track. And
beautiful.
so it wasn't just for him and his family, it was for a bigger. So I went, I met with him, and sure enough, that is exactly what happened. He basically integrated that higher dimensional energy into his body. When he integrated that higher dimensional energy into his body, that impact was strong enough to literally displace physical reality, like the wind was moving and emotion was being felt, and there was all kinds of things taking place there. And so that happened. And then for 10/10, when I was getting ready to do that first Three Eye Atlas session, there was a little boy um, that is the son of one of the people that was in a mentorship that I was offering. And we were just checking in on Three Eye Atlas, and he comes back and he says, it's a reality revolution. And he said, don't be afraid to jump in. And so I was like, what am I jumping into? It's like practical me, right? What am I jumping into? And he said, you're jumping into reality as it actually is instead of the way it's been conditioned to be.
Mm,
And so I was like, okay, so again, Three Eye Atlas is something that is altering our experience of reality. We've been conditioned to, a little microscopic view of reality, but of course, we're all more than we perceive ourselves to be. So this kid is like a little Buddha. I mean, his energy is just clear and pristine, and it was almost like he was stabilizing. Like, so if this first child, if Gavin brought this energy in, it was like Siddharth was
mm,
stabilizing it,
holding it.
holding it, yeah, refining it. And that's exactly what they asked for these three eye atlas sessions. One was receiving or bringing the information in. The second is stabilizing. And the one on 12/12 will be the embodiment of that, or the ability to be in that frequency. So so I'm watching all of this, and then something really remarkable happened. And I know you and I've talked about this, but it still gets me every time,
Mm,
Heather, that because it's proving to me that humanity, if these kids were functioning in a different field altogether, and collective humanity was functioning in, I'll say, a lower field or a conditioned field, that gap has always been pretty significant, like so significant that maybe somebody has telepathic communication with one of these kids, but they don't know what to do with that, or they dismiss it, or it's just like it's too far, it's a bridge too far, you might say. And that's been going on for the last 30 years, or as long as I've been working with the kids. Um, but that gap is narrowing and narrowing more recently, especially with things like 3i Atlas and other supports. That gap is getting much narrower. And I knew that not too long ago because I had a brand new client, somebody who I'd never worked with before, had heard about me through the telepathy tapes, and she had all the same questions that any beautiful mother wants to know about their child. And but this time when I closed my eyes to connect with this child, I felt him walk past me.
Mm.
Like I literally might, somebody brushed my arm. And he turned around and he looked at me and he said, "Are you talking to me?" And usually when you telepathically communicate with people, it's like you're just in their field. So there's just an exchange of information. This was almost like a physical encounter, like, "Oh, you're talking to me." And I said, "Yes. Well, what's going on here? Why is that different?" And he said, "Because because you're in my world." He said, "You're not talking to me or connecting with me from your world to my world. You're here in my world." I didn't know really what that meant in the moment. I knew that whatever that connection was a connection that was strong enough to be felt physically, like physically. And then all of a sudden I said, "Okay, your mom still has all these questions to ask you." And he said, "Bring her to me." Now, every parent for the last 30 years has desired, of course, to make a connection with their child, to make a real connection, not through their lens, but soul to soul, heart to heart, see them as they actually are. And then I didn't know what he was talking about. So I was like, "Okay, what are we doing here?" Again, I'm having to go back and ask him. He's the one who knows. And he basically said, "Put her in an elevator. We're going to do this imaginary thing." But it wasn't imaginary at all because although her mind needed something to do, go in the elevator, get up there, as she gets the doors open, so to speak, all of a sudden she's saying, "Oh my gosh, what's happening to me? What's going on? What's taking what?" And I'm having to ask her to breathe and say, "What's you explain to me what's going on? What are you noticing?" And she said, My head feels all fuzzy. I can't really feel my legs. I feel like I'm not quite in my body. It's like I'm hearing things, differently." And I said, "I think you've just entered your child's reality. This is how he might be experiencing 3D, right? 3D." And I said, "But if you're where I think you are, then you should be able to call him over to you
Mm.
and you should be able to meet." And she did. And I knew the minute it happened, Heather, because she burst into tears, as any of us would, right? And that session went on and completed. And I sat with that so much afterwards because I have had the kids over the years take me into their worlds, like almost like an out of body experience, where they grab my hand and I'm in their reality and they're talking and they're coherent in the body. But I have never, ever in my life seen a parent request to go to where their kids are vibrationally. Not, it's not a cognitive thing. It's like the same vibration. I've never, ever seen that. And to me, that was the most evidence I have seen that these two realities are coming closer and closer, close enough to start coupling, right? And whether she can do that in my presence and then has a harder time, doing that on her own, which is true, or whether the very fact that it could be that coupling could take place, even if it's within that hour session, was mind-boggling to me because, and I went back to this kid afterwards and I asked some more questions. And he said, yes, this mother who came in all of her beauty and all of her innocence with a wide open heart, that mother's love kind of thing. She was open in that moment. And it was almost like there was a triad, um, a triad where she was open. He saw the potentials and possibilities. I was able to hold some kind of coherent field for that, but that triad, that combination allowed something really miraculous to happen in that moment. And same with the kiddo who landed his energy and displaced, like the physical reality. These triads are fascinating to me, and I'm spending a lot of time looking into this because I don't like the idea of somebody being the one that does something to somebody else, right? Uh, there's I like this idea, and not just like the idea, but I like the energetics of what comes to pass when you have this triad, this very solid space for something to happen. And it's the last, since 8/8, I would say, it's just been happening faster and faster. Whether it's individual clients or whether it's groups, it almost feels like we're getting to experience that evolutionary leap. Like in real time in our bodies, we're awareness of it. And I just don't think that that would be possible unless collective humanity was well on the rise. So,
It just, as you're saying, it speaks to the fact that there's a greater and greater possibility of this integration so that these dimensional realities aren't so separate. I mean, you've been journeying between the realms and being able to go into these other realities to meet the children there. But they're in essence saying it's getting to a point where they can begin to blend and there are no longer these firm divisions. It's all blurring. And that there's also this energy coming from them into this dimensional reality, into time and space, so
yes,
that it's transforming this dimension. And we're remembering that we are multi-dimensional beings, but they're really guiding us in how to open to that and make that transition.
yeah, I think we're transmuting our shadows into the gifts or into the cities. It's like we're we're transforming them by being present to them, being compassionate to them, being loving to them. But this whole shift out of separation and into unity within ourselves, unifying, allowing all to exist. It's yeah, if this is where humanity's going, Heather, I'm all in. It's like it's so exciting to look at it through that lens and also to know that you have a population, I all of us come and especially if we're interested in this kind of work, we want to be of service or be in support in whatever way we can be. And then, and then I see a whole population of children who, as from a soul perspective, are saying, okay, it's time. It's time. It's time for human evolution to really not be a thought or something out there, but like literally start to be embodied. And I remember early on thinking, I was just so blown away by this population because you see the frequency, the vibrational frequency of who they actually are in truth. And then you see the challenge that that physical body has embodying that light, embodying that frequency. And it's amazing to me that they're here at all, in mass like this. But I have a feeling that that diagnosis that we know as autism is going to start to fade as we move further and further, probably 2027 and beyond. It's really going to start to fade because you might say the base frequency is going to be more compatible with that essence. And so the same frequency might be coming in, but it's going to have a place to rest. It's going to have a place to land. And so all of these souls that came in and had this diagnosis, I mean, I I think we owe them quite a bit,
Well,
you
they
know.
have come in to be of service to us in a phenomenal way. And because of their differentness, and this is, our conditioning and separation, because of their differentness, then we label them
Mhm.
and see them as having a problem.
Right.
And part of what I love in what you're describing, Susie, with the triad is you have these um, autistic children holding the higher frequency, the parent in third dimensional reality wanting to connect, but having to go through transformation, transmutation to be in that same reality. And then it's necessary to have the third in the triad who knows both worlds,
Yeah.
that can hold the coherence and the stability to
Mhm.
allow that merger to happen. And that again may be looking to in the more of us that do that inner work,
Mhm.
then we can hold that stability
Yeah.
for others to be in that transformational process.
I think that's so accurate. And, anytime we're moving from one reality to another, I have a tendency to work with people also have had big spiritual experiences that they can't really integrate into their daily life, or people have had early trauma that are having a hard time integrating that into their daily lives, or elevating it into their daily lives. And I I think that there's it's almost like having that third wheel, right? Having that third space creates a little bit of neutrality, or can create a little bit of neutrality, because if you've got somebody who has a big experience like that, big kundalini awakenings, big, we all know that it's very hard to regulate our bodies around something like that. It was very hard for me to regulate my body after Riley. It's like going from, this version, the very small lens version, to that bigger version. But this is what these kids are dealing with all day, every day. They're always dealing with this higher frequency energy. It's like having a Kundalini awakening every day, and of course, the body's going to be dysregulated until it can integrate that. But to your point about triads, I think especially between parent and child, you've got a child who looks like they're not doing so well in this world, but holds a very high frequency. And you have a parent who looks like they're doing very well in this world, but might feel completely, disheveled or overwhelmed in their inner world. And so it's like it's a merging of these realities where the kids are saying, we can help you with the higher dimensional aspects of yourself, and you can help us in the physical aspects of reality, right? And I think having that third person to support that navigation takes some of the weight off or takes some of the pressure off. And especially if that person, like you say, has done some of their own work so that they can hold that stable field. Yeah.
Yeah, it just holds stability and sense of safety
Yeah.
and sense of openness to what is unfolding that can allow the change to happen. And the parent or the person in the transformational process to trust that this is safe, even
Yeah.
though it feels disorienting and overwhelming. It's actually a process of healing and transformation.
Yeah. I think that word safety is huge because the kids said, you look at us as if we like that we're the ones that are up and out, right? And that's the way they look. And they would say, but what if we're a mirror of humanity's separation from themselves, right? What if we're a mirror? So we've all gone up and out, have a car accident, it's like, it could be anything that sends us up and out of our bodies. The challenge is that most of us, because whatever that was wasn't safe, we stay up and out of our bodies. We lose connection with how we feel or what we're experiencing. We lose connection with the body. But this opportunity to meet those parts of ourselves that have been disconnected from the body, and usually those come up as triggers, right? But as they come up and then we're meeting them, again, we're literally, um, how do I want to say it? We're literally infusing our form with our essence.
Mm,
That I always say that we're informing ourselves, truly informing ourselves. And the kids talk about this a lot, that this is always the invitation. And that if we're collectively up and out, doesn't it make sense that they're mirroring up and out? If we're disconnected from our own voices, from our own hearts, from our own whatever, that they can mirror that very clearly, but they're not mirroring it to punish anybody. They're mirroring it just to say, this is the place that needs to be loved. This is the place that wants some compassion. Yeah.
it's like they're calling us back home to ourselves.
Yes.
And I love your description of up and out, because that is what happens when we're traumatized or we're in shock or we have a spiritual experience that overwhelms us. We dissociate and
Yeah.
we disconnect. And part of what I think you're saying that's so important is to move into this higher consciousness doesn't mean let's get up and out, rise
No.
above all of this and
Mm.
exit. It's actually how do we be fully here in embodiment, in the full range of what we feel, and
Yeah.
be in our wholeness here.
Yeah. And I think that that so many people that do have trauma, on the one hand, it's beautiful because it it asks you to search for something more. It asks you to search for something that's more loving, more compassionate. And so I think that it's beautiful because it does put us on our journeys, right? Whatever that journey might be. I think the challenge is, again, staying in that. I think once we get there and we feel that, and it's yummy, and we're meeting aspects of ourselves that feel much more nurturing and compassionate. We have a tendency to stay out there, and people can get really deeply involved in staying out there, like they want to be up and out. And the kids just keep saying that, as far out as we go is as far in as we need to go. And, if we're having a lot of multidimensional experience, the anecdote to that is being deep in ourselves, doing that inner work, because that's what integrates the two. Whereas if we go up and out and spend all of our time there, yes, it's a beautiful reality, but it doesn't have the impact in the physical world that we might hope it to have, right? It might have impact in other worlds, but this whole idea of, we're, like you said, we're all multidimensional beings living a human experience.
Mm.
But we don't want to exit the human experience, the fullness of that, in order to be multidimensional, right? We are multidimensional. We just want to be able to embody that, so we're experiencing that practically, that multidimensionality can be practical. It can be here in this physical world, loving ourselves, broadcast out to loving others. It's like that happens on the ground, transformation in this physical world. And that kind of transformation gets me excited.
It is so exciting. It feels like they're reminding us that when you are living in unity consciousness, then everything is sacred.
Yes.
Everything is a fractal expression of cosmic consciousness. So our bodies are sacred. Our experiences with each other are sacred. Our emotions are sacred. Then you're really opening into the wholeness instead of bypassing anything.
Yeah, and to have that sense of wholeness in your body, like as a human being, to have that. I mean, I've heard you talk in the past about homo luminous. I think that's exactly what that is. It's the full embodiment of the light that we actually are, but while we're still in physical human form, and what does that look like? I don't, it's like, who knows, right? But what we do know is that it's that lightening, that lighter version, that lightening up, that enjoyment, that the joy of life um, shows up. And I think that I mean, there's so much challenge in being human, right? And I also think that there's so much challenge in being separated from who we are in truth because of that. But as that comes back together, then it just, life takes on a whole different hue. Yeah. Mhm.
Well, and as you said, this is the evolutionary leap that we're in
Mhm.
to reclaim, remember our capacity to be homo luminous ones, to be in wholeness, to celebrate being in form,
Yes.
but in love, in our wholeness. And before we close, it's just so moving. And it fills me with wonder and gratitude that these autistic children have come to help us in this journey. And the deeper I go into understanding the earth changes that we're in, these experiences that we're having in the solar system with Three Eye Atlas, with these comets showing up, it's like we're being so guided and supported to heal and be in this shift. We're not alone. We are surrounded by loving support if we open to that.
It's it's mind-boggling how much support we actually have. And again, I think sometimes we can't fully see that until we've loved some of those aspects of ourselves. And that's why I always tell people it's like that's the first thing. Love, compassion, and understanding for you, because that opens us up to the wonders of what's actually here for us, and we have to give that to ourselves first, and then we're open to those wonders. So, yeah, it's very interesting times to say the least.
And Susie, I just want to say again how much I respect you and honor that you've really been open to your own transformational process in interacting with those who are guiding us into these times of healing and transformation, and that you've really been a bridge builder. You've really been a pioneer helping reweave those dimensional realities. And maybe we could close with I love that story of when you were 7
Oh,
and how it was such a prophetic moment about this mission you've been on in your life.
yeah. So the story goes, I was in my front yard at my house when 7-year old, and I was looking up at the sky. And my mom came out onto the porch and said, Susie, what are you doing? And I said, I'm waiting for the kids to come. And, of course, that doesn't make any sense, right? So no malice. She was just going, go play with the kids in the neighborhood. They're not going to come out of the sky. And, but there was something really early on. I can't say that I knew what that was, but I did know that I was waiting. At least that was an indication I knew I was waiting. And the other thing that happened about the same time is I had a grandfather who was a bridge builder and a church builder, and great grandfather actually. And I used to always say I wanted to build bridges too. And people around me knew I was terrified of heights at the time. So it's like you can't build a bridge if you can't. But again, it's fascinating, isn't it? It's like there's just like the kids know what they need. The kids know the path that they're on, the trajectory that they're on. I think all of us do. I think all of us get those hints early on. And yeah, it's a fun story to tell in retrospect, especially. Yeah.
It is such a beautiful reminder that we all have that soul self that really is always
Gross.
a part of unity consciousness and knows the path we're on and is trying to guide us on the way. So,
Yeah, yeah. Thank you.
but thank you, Susie, for all that you're doing, and thank you for being in this conversation today.
Thanks for having me. It's been brilliant. Yeah.
All right, and blessings to all of you.